everybody, and special thanks to Dr. Mahapatra and Dr. Sadanand Shetty for bringing me in for this symposium. And I hope to share certain new data with regards to ICD in heart failure. Certainly, there is a need to go to the drawing board in this regard. Through most of the talk, I'll be discussing about the indications for implanting ICD in heart failure, and I wind up with a few remarks on selecting the type of ICD and the downside of having ICD in heart failure patient. So in 2015, the European Society of Cardiology guidelines came with regards to selecting patients with heart failure who should receive an ICD. And actually, when somebody already has a VT, it's a no-brainer that he does require ICD. What the clinician needs to take care of is that the estimated survival of this patient with a good function status should be at least a year before he makes a choice to put ICD. So only then the benefits will accrue. And then it's a 1A indication. So actually, I need not discuss the secondary prevention indication for ICD in heart failure here further. So therefore, most of the time from here on, I'll be discussing primary prevention ICD indication in heart failure patient. And what the European Society guidelines recommend is with some riders is that the patient should have a symptomatic heart failure, his ejection fraction should be below 35%. He should be on optimal medical therapy, and that's probably very important these days. And there might be some difference, and the level of evidence might differ a little bit whether you're talking of an ischemic heart disease with heart failure or a non-ischemic heart failure. A NYJ class 4 patient who is not ambulatory with heart failure, recurrently getting admitted, has a limited life expectancy, you would only consider ICD if you can have the possibility to do a CRT or a ventricular assist device or a cardiac transplant. Some of these things we have discussed earlier in this symposium. So these are the riders for NYJ class 4 patient. But primary prevention indication seems to be in place if you have a person with NYJ 2 to 3 heart failure as a primary SAD prevention indication. Now, the American guidelines, which came 2 years later in 2017, were even a little more liberal. When it came to ischemic heart disease, actually, it had no inhibition in recommending ICD for even asymptomatic heart failure patient whose LV ejection fraction was less than 30%. So these have been more liberal than the European Society guidelines. And regarding the NYJ class 4 patient, it again said the same thing is that they should have access to advanced heart failure therapy. Then you may bridge them by doing an ICD. Whereas when it came to non-ischemic heart failure, once again, I'll lead you through this, that when the patients are NYJ class 2 and 3, it is a primary prevention ICD is definitely in place. The care that you have to take is that they should be on good guideline directed medical therapy. And then when they continue to be symptomatic for heart failure, they should receive a ICD. Remember, I'm talking of non-ischemic cardiomyopathy. And these guidelines are pretty silent in asymptomatic heart failure patients. So there seems to be a perception in the American guidelines that when you're talking of asymptomatic heart failure, possibly you make a difference based on whether it is ischemic etiology or a non-ischemic etiology when you choose to give ICD. So this was somewhere in 2017. Heart failure is arrhythmogenic, and that's why we are talking of primary prevention indication. It's not only a mechanical problem, but because of the changes in substrate, it tends to cause ventricular arrhythmias. And obviously the myocardial fibrosis and the scar can be evaluated by an MRI, but even the hypertrophy and stretch, which are little functional, reducing them by using ACE inhibitors or diuretics can help in reducing the incidence of ventricular arrhythmias. Similarly, it's an electrical problem. There is a reduced repolarization reserve, and then they have a long QT, and therefore they tend to be arrhythmogenic. So therefore, heart failure itself, even if a ventricular arrhythmia has not been documented, it is arrhythmogenic in nature. So should we prescribe Cordron? Of course not. As long as 15 years ago, it was very clear from the SCUDEF trial that amiodarone was as good as a placebo. So prescribing amiodarone as substitute for ICD is definitely not in place as a primary prevention indication. I think there we do not have any discussion. There is a reason to look at this whole business of ICD as a primary prevention indication in heart failure again for these two reasons. One is that the ICD trials, which published about 15 years back, had their patient included almost 20 years ago. So that time the heart failure management was different. Similarly, CRT was not in practice at that time, and things have changed since. Hence, the theme of this talk of mine was to review some of the recent data in last 3 4 years as to how it changes our indications for ICD in heart failure, and then primarily I'm talking of a primary prevention indication. So one thing has been stressed, I think, umpteen number of times earlier, that the guideline-directed medical therapy, which means that you should use a proven beta blocker and at least the ACE or a ARB, and that's must. But we are doing it less. If we do it adequately, we might be even decreasing the need of ICD. So all these patients have to be on good guideline-directed medical therapy. And secondly, even patients who receive an ICD should receive good amount of medical therapy, because only then you would affect their survival. So we have to stress a lot on guideline directed medical therapy. Now, this has once again been said earlier that sacubitril valsartan, the ARNI, has made a big difference. The Paradigm Heart Failure trial in 2014 drove the ARNIs into the trials. And when it comes to discussing even sudden cardiac death, you see that there was a 20% reduction in sudden cardiac death. And they made a bold statement like that the ARNIs could be cost effective by increasing the survival at a lower cost compared to ICD. So they started talking of either postponing the ICD or taking the place of ICD. So that's a big statement to be made pre-ICD. So as clinician, we should at least ensure that all our patients are on ARNIs before we decide about an ICD. In fact, post ICD also it makes a difference. This is something that was published last year. So patients who had ICDs and when they were continued on the ARNIs, you saw that they had lesser VT-VF episodes than the patients who did not receive the ARNIs. And secondly, these benefits were mainly in patients who had an improvement in ejection fraction. So the responders to ARNI did better when they had ICDs in terms of reducing the PVC burden as well as reducing the number of non-sustained VTs. So ARNI has a great interaction when you are deciding the ICD indication. And yet, we are underutilizing the ICD in heart failure. Only 10% of the patients that are indicated in the ESC guidelines from a publication of last year show that very few are actually getting a primary prevention ICD. And this comes despite the fact that almost 2,500 patients showed over a good length of time. So from 1 year to 5 years, over 5 years, they showed that when the ICD was in, they did better in terms of all-cause mortality as well as cardiovascular mortality. So primary prevention ICD is underutilized despite the fact that over the next 5 years, it brings benefits in the all-cause mortality and cardiovascular mortality, and that this benefit is maintained across all the subgroups. So whether it is ischemic heart, whether it is male, female, whether it is elderly, young, whether it is whatever NYHA class to start with, and whatever the low ejection fraction it is, they seem to benefit and they seem to maintain the benefit over 5 years. And despite this fact from a registry published last year, we seem to be underutilized in the ICD. So therefore, it's very relevant as a part of the symposium that we discuss this further. So for example, one doubt that is always there in the clinician's mind is whether non-ischemic heart failure deserves ICD less. Probably, because the Warsef cohorts, which had all the ICD patients, when they were divided into patients who had ischemic heart and non-ischemic heart, and they were given matched propensity matched controls, twice the number of propensity matched controls in each of the group, what was seen is that it made no difference in the non-ischemic hearts whether they had a defibrillator or not. It only made difference in patients who had ischemic heart disease. The mortality was lower when the ICD was in. So we do understand that if the patients have a non-ischemic heart disease, you might withhold the ICDs a bit more, especially if the patient is asymptomatic. I think if a non-ischemic heart is NYHA class 2 or 3, it's not the same statement. But in an asymptomatic non-ischemic heart, you might give more importance to optimizing the medical treatment. Now, does it matter which symptom class of heart failure you should treat? or which symptom class deserve less. Actually, it seems there is nothing like that. Now, once again, these are very recent publications from the last 2 years, which show that even patients in NYHA class 1, so the asymptomatic heart failures, also the mortality is less when they receive ICD. It is obviously less when they receive a primary prevention ICD in symptomatic heart failure patients. So this is important. And in fact, when you follow these patients over the next 8 years, you see that the asymptomatic heart failure patients have appropriate ICD therapies. So I think it is very, very clear from these two studies that in the long term, even the NYHA class 1 or asymptomatic heart failure patient, you should not withhold the ICDs. The second thing is QRS width, and I think this has been discussed by Dr. Pandurangi some time back, that QRS width will make you decide what kind of device goes in. When it's a narrow QRS heart failure, you would probably put ICD. When it's a wide QRS heart failure with some kind of IVCD, you will consider a CRTD. Now, yes, when they have a CRTD, they do better. The mortality is, the survival probability is higher when they get a CRTD as compared to when they get a ICD. But this will happen only if he is a CRT responder. So only when a CRT-D responder, then only you get a survival probability that is higher. A CRT-D, a CRT-D non-responder is as good as an ICD. So even in patients with wide QRS, you do make a decision as to type of the device, but unless somebody is a responder to the CRT, he will not have a higher survival. So this is something again important to note. This is a complex problem in heart failure patient that makes that brings the clinician out of us. Now these are very elderly patients. You all of you have these scenarios in your practice. 80-year-old patients who have either ischemic cardiomyopathy or non-ischemic cardiomyopathy. Now look at the other things. Their comorbidity levels are quite high, especially the frailty. There are certain scores to determine that. But as a clinician, all of you understand what the frailty is. Add to that some other comorbidities, and all that will decide what you do regarding ICD in an elderly patient. So because the goals and the values are different, at the age of 80 you are not trying to prolong life, you're trying to make them comfortable. So therefore the best of the clinician you should come out when you make a decision in a very elderly patient. Not that ICD is not beneficial, but then as a clinician you should take the appropriate call. The next question is, many times you are in your clinic and you are seeing a patient who is referred to you as a second or third referral. He is already known with the LV ejection fraction of 20% for last 5 years. And when you suggest an ICD to such an asymptomatic patient, he asks you as to he has lived with the LV ejection fraction of 20% for so many years. So does that mean that he is insured against getting a sudden cardiac death? Actually, no. If you look at his quintiles of less than 8 months, less than 18 months, less than 65 months, more than 5 years, if you look at this, the mortality obviously rises as the years go by from the diagnosis of heart failure. But if you look at the proportion of sudden cardiac death, it still remains between 25 to 30%. So it is not that if somebody is asymptomatic with heart failure or has a duration of heart failure which is pretty old, that he is less at risk for a sudden cardiac death and less deserving for ICD. That's not correct, because sudden cardiac death continues to be almost one third of the cause of getting into of death. Now here is one more question. So how fast should you implant an ICD? Many times as a EP guy, you get patients referred when they are admitted for heart failure. Now it's very clear that you should not hurry. You should allow optimal guideline directed medical therapy. In fact, the in-hospital outcomes, the 30-day outcomes, as well as the 90-day outcomes are better when you delay the procedure for more than 3 months, and in different aspects, the all-cause mortality, the all-cause readmission rate, or the cardiovascular readmission rate. So on all these aspects, you should delay the therapy to at least 3 months, treat with appropriate guideline-directed medical therapy. And this is more important because earlier in the day, you heard about the ARMIs and you heard about the SGLT2s. So you should optimize the medical therapy before you make an indication. This will then you will have less procedural outcomes and less of the other endpoints. So therefore, it is best to optimize the medical treatment over 3 months, particularly in the newly diagnosed heart failure patient, and then consider an ICD. Actually, it's a multivariate thing. there are too many issues to be taken together before you make an indication for ICD in heart failure. And this has been brought out in different risk prediction models. The most tried and most tested one is the Seattle heart failure model. So there are two scores here. One is the Seattle heart failure model score, and the other is Seattle proportional risk model score. So this SPRM is actually, for the sake of time, I'll not go into too many details, but if you look at these things, you can understand what determines the SCD risk. And if you have a SPRM score which is high, then these patients are more candidates for an ICD. Now, this has been validated in a huge number of patients. So 1 lakh patients from the US who are a part of National Cardiovascular Data Registry. This has been published about 3 years back. You see that as the SHM, the Seattle heart failure model score increases, their mortality, their probability of survival goes down. But if their SPRM score is high, so the SPRM score is high, then the ICD would benefit is much more. So therefore, SPRM score is something that decides who's